It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. On today's show, we're continuing our Full Access series where we are interviewing exceptional leaders that happen to be women from across industry. Today, we've got an incredible guest and one of my favorite supply chain leaders. More on that in just a minute, but you're in for a treat. Like all of our series here on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, Greg's favorite, wherever you get your podcast from. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. So real quick, let's thank some of our sponsors that allow us to bring best practices and innovative ideas to you, our audience: The Effective Syndicate, Vector Global Logistics, ProPurchaser.com, APICS Atlanta, and many more. And you can check out our sponsors, each of our sponsors, on the show notes of this episode. So let's welcome in my fearless and esteemed co-host here today on today's show. Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, trusted advisor. Greg, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I am really excited about this interview.
Yeah.
Repeat guest. I already know a good bit of the story behind our guest today. And I think I'm going to find out a lot more things I don't know over the next hour or so. So I'm excited.
I feel like the new kid, right? She's been here before.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So this is my first time with the two of you. So I may just sit and watch and let you guys talk about it like old friends.
Jump on in.
That's right. We're playing doubles, triples here. So. Yeah. But, on that note, it seems like we've had a string of repeat guests over the last couple of weeks, which hasn't always been, a lot of times we'll go on a street where they're all new. Some of them are new to podcasts. Some of them are new to interviews. But here lately, we've brought back a bunch of old friends, and that's exactly what today's show is going to be like, too. So with no further ado, let's welcome in our special guests here today. Drum roll, please. Tandreia Bellamy, VP of Engineering with UPS Global Freight Forwarding. Good morning, Tandreia.
Good morning.
Great to see you.
Good to be back.
We enjoyed our breakfast over City Grits wherever we were a month or so ago.
You trying to get another sponsorship?
Yeah.
So, what's funny, I know you travel a lot, and I think one of the things we're going to touch on here today is getting some of your insights, but you also have spent a chunk of time at one of the behemoths in supply chain space. And it's always interesting. There's so many people that work at UPS in so many different roles, and they are driving the industry forward. And so beyond our friendship and the fact that I love a lot of things that you're involved with anyway, I can't wait to hear what else you've uncovered since the last time we sat down, right?
All right.
So, but for starters, let's talk about your current role at UPS Global Freight Forwarding. So what do you do in that role?
I'm doing a lot of discovery right now. As you know, I've been with UPS over 30 years, and this part of the business is something I never touched before. The forwarding industry is just completely different. And going in and seeing what things can I do from an industrial engineering standpoint to enhance that business unit, whether it's technologies, efficiencies, just bringing in a different mindset, a different viewpoint. Because I haven't been in forwarding. Many of the partners that I work with have been in forwarding for a very long time, either with coming from the Fritz acquisition or the Menlo acquisition. So they have very long and storied backgrounds in forwarding, whereas I've been in logistics and transportation, small package, contract logistics. So the global forwarding piece is just new.
Fresh eyes.
Absolutely.
Always valuable. And really from a number of different ways. We're going to talk more about the incredible value that having that different perspective is, down the road here in the interview. But so speaking of the type of problems that UPS Global Freight Forwarding is helping its customers solve, speak to that a little bit.
Well, there's a lot of things that UPS does that nobody knows.
I believe it.
So right now we have been excellent consultants to our customers as all of the tariff talk, the tariff wars, the trade wars, as all of that has gone down, we have consulting services that helps ensure that, number one, our customers are compliant in everything that they're doing with bringing packages across borders. Also ensuring that they understand advantages and benefits that are out there to them, whether it's with our foreign trade zones, through our trade services, STAS as our consulting arm from a compliance standpoint, and the customs and brokerage industry. So there's a lot of things that we do, but it's all about how do we help our customers to engage in business, to grow their businesses in the most efficient and cost-effective manners, whether it's domestically or globally.
Well, I bet in the last few months, the foreign trade zones and your trade and tariff and import-export expertise as an organization, enterprise, has been really tapped on here lately, huh?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. We were just talking about that in another episode with Michael Golden, AGG, and Adam McDaniel with Redwood, and that was one of the things that everyone kind of around the table encouraged people to do is get help with that.
Absolutely.
That compliance. It's too complex and right now somewhat fast moving for a company who's trying to do their core business to mess with, right? That's great. You're right. That's a service I did not know that you guys provided.
We do.
I bet there's a lot to your point. I mean, I've been in Atlanta now for 3 kids ago, so about 15 years, what it feels. And, we've rubbed elbows with all types of folks, as y'all might imagine, that do different things at UPS, as I was mentioning earlier. And we're still uncovering new things that you're involved in. But also, I think that when you think about supply chain and end-to-end supply chain and the things that is touching more things than ever before as well.
Right.
So, all right. So I want to move back in time as we really, kind of now that we've kind of established who you are and what you do and your department or function at UPS. Let's kind of talk more about Tandreia Bellamy and your background. So let's move back in time a little bit. Let's talk about where you grew up.
I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
And my great-grandmother, even though there was a 60-year age difference, was absolutely my best friend. I never had a babysitter. I was always with Grandma. At that time, kindergarten wasn't mandatory, and she got mad at the teacher for giving my sweater to someone else and took me out of kindergarten. But the education that I got with her definitely exceeded that.
What was her name?
Catherine Bell. Our running joke was that when I went to college, she would come with me and live in the dorm.
Did she go by, how did you call her? I'm just always curious about grandparents, and great-grandparents.
She was just Grandma.
Was she? Okay.
She was just Grandma.
So Catherine Bell. So you're already kind of foreshadowing one of our questions in terms of, role models, but we'll touch on that in a second. So growing up, what were some of your early hobbies, especially any that might, foreshadow what you did later in life?
I was absolutely a tomboy. I was, my only sister is 9 years my junior, but the house across the street had 10 kids. And, oh man, we played all the time. But it was always games that, involved one ball and a lot of kids.
Right.
So we would play, whether it was softball or football or kickball or something with a ball and a lot of kids that you didn't have to worry about sharing.
Yes.
And, great times.
Did your grandma ever get on some of those teams and
no.
You played short and she played third or something?
No. Remember, it's my great-grandmother. There was a 60-year age difference.
Wow.
So no, Grandma was not playing ball.
I missed that. Okay. All right. Wow. All right. So, Greg, I know you're always curious about this next question.
Yeah. So I think, as Scott said, you kind of foreshadowed this, but tell us a little bit about some of the mentors or role models or whomever you might have had as you come up as a kid or even throughout your career.
One of the early influences was my high school counselor, Miss Mary Cummings, and she would tease that I was her suntan kid. And
in Florida, no less.
In Florida. And you had then definitely, but unfortunately even now, there wasn't a big push for females in the math and sciences. And she recognized that I did well in math and science and really, really encouraged it to the point that her husband was an engineer at Honeywell. And I had my first summer internship as a junior in high school because they were doing a special program to try and keep both minorities and females in the sciences. So she was a huge, huge, huge influence. When I applied for college, she was working out all kinds of things so that I didn't have to pay all of the application fees and everything else. And it's 100% because of her that I ended up at Stanford.
Wow.
My goal was I want to go someplace warm. And that was it. I mean, I was a native Floridian. So the thought of snow was like, are you kidding me? No.
Yeah, love you, Minnesota, but that's not where I'm going to college.
Simple visions. That's the key.
Yes, absolutely.
Someplace warm.
Someplace warm. So I had applied to University of Florida and thought I was all set to be a Gator. And she said, this is too good of an opportunity to pass up. And
it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Arranged for me to meet someone local who also attended Stanford, and the rest they say is history.
Wow.
But let me
awesome.
ask you about Stanford, obviously in California. You grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida. You know, I remember when the Air Force sent me to Wichita, Kansas, and
You're welcome.
I left that, that support structure back on the East Coast, and that is challenging. Especially at the age of college freshmen. So talk about that. How did you adjust? From going from Florida to California and new friends, all that good stuff.
The adjustment was because of the friends. I had 3 really close friends. We're still close. In fact, we were just together this summer for an event, and we were each other's support structure. And we were all from different places. One came in from Virginia, one was from Indiana, I was from Florida. The fourth was from California, who ironically lives here in Georgia right now. And we were there for each other, and we bonded and supported each other and pushed each other. I mean, we all graduated. They're all doctors. One is a doctor, but is a sociology professor at University of San Francisco. The other one is the DeKalb County Public Health Director or something along those lines.
And for our listeners, DeKalb County is one of the largest counties in the metro Atlanta area. So
yes,
that is a full couple plates.
Yes, and the other one is a psychiatrist. So 3 doctors and a VP.
Well, I guess you don't not go and do big things after you graduate from Stanford, right?
No, there's some people who don't do big things.
Yeah. But they were born rich. Those ones, right?
Absolutely.
You don't have to do big things if Dad can do it for you.
So after graduating from Stanford, down the road, I believe you went to get an advanced degree from the University of Central Florida. So talk a little. Why did you feel compelled to get that, to earn that?
It was a differentiator. You had a lot of people with industrial engineering degrees
which you got at Stanford, right? The undergraduate in industrial engineering.
Undergraduate was in industrial engineering. A lot of people in industrial engineering, because it is the most business of the engineering degrees, they go on to get an MBA. Very, very common. There are several schools that now have almost a dual degree where you do IE and then do another year and have an MBA as well. And I just didn't want to go that route. So my choice was I want to do an advanced degree in engineering. So UCF was just a natural choice. I had come back home. I wanted to be close to grandma. California was way too far away from my grandmother. And UCF just is a great school. At that time, it was really a hidden gem. Industry was well aware of UCF. You had Harris, Lockheed Martin. The Navy was a big supporter. And there was a very, very strong engineering department there. They also had a program, and yes, I'm going to date myself. They had a program called Feeds, and they videotaped all of the classes. And you could go and check out the VHS tape to view the class.
That wasn't that long ago, Tandreia. Let's just
that means
say that.
You know what a VHS tape is.
True.
So it was a lot of support because they had a big transient student body at that time. A lot of professionals came back. The classes were taught from 7 to 10 at night. So you got to have a true classroom feel. You didn't have to do the distance learning thing, and that just served me a lot better. But I also, like I said, I wanted a differentiator. I knew that I loved UPS and I wanted to move forward with UPS. So I wanted to lay the groundwork to make sure that I was in position to do that when the opportunity presented itself.
So can we go back a step? Sorry. So you were already at UPS when you went to UCF, is that right?
I was yes. In fact, I took advantage of tuition reimbursement. I was a supervisor at UPS when I started my master's and actually got promoted before I graduated, and I was a manager. So
you went there right out of Stanford, pretty much,
it was about a 4 to 5 year gap. You know,
so, sorry, to UPS?
Between Stanford and UCF. I had started UPS before I had my undergraduate degree.
Okay.
I started as a part-time supervisor, as a part-time hourly at UPS before I graduated.
What were you doing then? I'm just curious because I had some fraternity brothers who loaded trucks and made decent money doing that.
I started unloading trucks.
Okay.
And at the time, minimum wage was $3.35, and they were paying $8 an hour to unload a truck.
Right.
It's like, I can do that.
Yeah.
So and full benefits.
Right.
Wow.
So
even for part-time.
Even for part-time. Yes.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Well, we still have full benefits for part-timers.
Is that right?
That is correct.
Huh. All right. So the degree that you received from Central Florida was a master's in
industrial engineering and management systems.
Okay. And so bringing it back to current 2019, you just had some big news and a huge honor that we talked about over that breakfast, where you were inducted into, well, I think it's Hall of Fame, but officially it's Distinguished Alumni by the University of Central Florida's College of Engineering and Computer Science.
That is correct.
Right?
Yes.
What an incredible honor. So for starters, beyond the obvious part of this, what makes this such a special honor for you?
It's a special honor because it's such a special university. It has grown tremendously. It now has between 68 and 70,000 students. It's in the top 3 in the country for the number of students. But the computer science and engineering department is just superb. It's the number 1 choice in the Southeast region. There are 12 states in the Southeast region for engineering. They have an unbelievable cybersecurity department. They are in the top 10 in the world. They have been the national champion for 4 years. They are very innovative in their approach to engineering. Most industrial engineering departments have required senior design project. And the kids get together. It's always a group project. Industry comes in. They supply different things that the students can do. Great hands-on learning environment. At UCF, they have a cross-functional senior design project because they said it's very rare that you're going to go out in the real world and only be on a project with industrial engineers. So they bring in kids from the computer science, industrial engineers, mechanical engineers. They even allow business students to participate so that you can have the marketing component of it, which makes it so much more applicable to what's going to happen in industry.
Wow. That's really insightful to do that.
Yes. Lockheed Martin has sponsored their cybersecurity lab because, again, the school is world-renowned in that respect. Harris has sponsored a building. Siemens has sponsored a lab. So industry really gets the value of the school.
Clearly, yeah.
Yes. So to be recognized in that environment, in a school that's that well respected for engineering, to be considered one of their distinguished alumni, absolutely was huge.
You got a bust somewhere out there, right? Like the NFL Hall of Fame is what I'm thinking, a special jacket.
I'm very happy with my very nice plaque that is proudly displayed in my home.
We should have had you bring it.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
I'll send you pictures.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge honor. But let's talk about what that might mean for others. We get a ton of feedback, especially as we have tried to diversify the thought leadership that we have on this show, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of feedback from other female leaders is, hey, one of the best things you can do is showcase other female leaders so that folks can see them and they can aspire to be. They can see what can happen. They can see the art of the possible. So along those lines, how important is this type of recognition for folks that may be looking for inspiration?
This recognition, I think, was important because they had a lot of students that came to the dinner. I think it was important because of the outreach that the university has to their alumni. I had been on campus earlier this year and spoke to one of the engineering seminars. 250 kids in the engineering seminar. It was just so much fun. When I got to campus, I was actually exiting the parking lot, and a young man came up on the golf cart. Hi, Miss Bellamy. And I'm thinking, okay, they showed pictures of him to everybody. He was like, I was in the seminar. That was great.
Oh, man.
And then a number of young ladies who came up and talked to me, who had also been either in the seminar or had heard about the seminar. That, like you said, that visibility is hugely important. And then not only the visibility from a female leader standpoint, but letting the students, male or female, know what the possibilities are for engineering. I was recently at a conference. It's called Go for the Greens, which is in Orlando, women's conference, but they brought in students, juniors and seniors in high school, freshmen and sophomores in college. And I did a presentation on careers in engineering, but I went just completely left where they thought I was going to be. I talked about, being a chocolate engineer, and I actually had candy that I passed out. And I said, have you ever thought about how with a Twix, they get the chocolate and the cookie and the caramel, and it's all always very consistent? And we talked about being a food engineer and how you have to have chemical engineers and mechanical engineers and people who understand how to make those processes. So you don't think about being a chocolate engineer. You just think about engineering being hard and boring. But there's a ton of really, really interesting, innovative careers that are in engineering. One more plug for UCF.
Yeah, please.
They have a student organization that has partnered with a couple of different industries and created a business that's called Limitless Solutions. And they print 3D printed prosthetics for children.
Oh, man.
They have now partnered with, I believe it's Marvel, and they can actually use some of their designs. So a Spider-Man 3D prosthetic arm that is going to these kids. So you're talking about practical, innovative, hands-on solutions. Impactful. So I highlighted that at this conference. Disney is one of the largest employers of industrial engineers. I mean, you can live your life just having fun and be an engineer.
That's right.
So yes, the leadership is very important. Showcasing female leaders, but just really getting the possibilities out there, because when you're in high school, most kids have no idea what an engineer does.
That's true. Absolutely.
So I have a quick question for you about being an engineer, because I have a like many things, I have a strong opinion about what makes somebody an engineer. So this is the litmus test that I use. When you were a kid and you got a toy or something like that, did you feel compelled to disassemble the toy and see how it worked?
I took some things apart. I will absolutely admit to taking some things apart.
I think there are certain skill sets that are, you're almost born into them, right? That, and I think that's a good indication for parents to have, is if you've got a kid who is so curious about whatever they've got, their toy, their phone, their thing, that they want to take it apart or examine it, they have a mind that is good for engineering. I mean, it may not be their thing, but at least explore that, because
I want to
that's
say
critical.
to parents, give kids things that they want to take apart. give your girls things that they want to take apart. It's okay for girls to have train sets or Legos or laboratory kits or what have you.
Yep.
Don't predispose your girls to certain things. And I have that conversation with my daughter all of the time. She's like, why do boys just get to play more? Because she's referring to the video games. And I said, that's because you girls always want to grow up so fast. So take some time and play, explore.
It's important.
I have 3 daughters, so that's an important lesson. Let's make sure we capture that. So that being the case, and you having shared some knowledge with students before, I'd like for you to think about hopefully your favorite student, the freshman in college, Tandreia Bellamy. What advice or guidance would you give her today if you look back on where she was?
I would have told her to get much more involved in student activities. I would have told her to learn how to build a network. Now, I had a support structure. Those are my 3 friends, and we called ourselves the crew. But I didn't have a network. And with the powerful university that I was at and the amount of money that was there and the number of people who are entrepreneurs and running their own businesses, if I had built a network, then as I go out to these schools and I talk to students, I've talked to a lot of students at HBCUs. If I had a network, I could pick up the phone and say, I just met a really great kid. I need you to get him an internship. That part I missed. So my future Tandreia Bellamy would have been even more powerful if I built a network.
That's really good. I think that's overlooked often especially in the highly skilled trades.
Yes.
You're so good at what you do and so engrossed and enthralled and in love with what you do that you can overlook that opportunity to really engage with people and make that happen. I've actually made that mistake running companies before. You get heads down trying to get this company over the goal line, and then you kind of one day it's over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. It's like a garden. If you don't nurture the garden, things are going to die. Same thing can be applied to your network.
Yeah.
If you don't take time to, and we've talked about it before, make those rapport deposits, right?
Yes.
Instead of they're all rapport withdrawals, and you attributed that to some methodology. I heard it once at a consulting firm.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah. I think that, but it's always stuck with me because it is, we all are familiar with folks that take.
Yes.
Rather than, and then some folks are there to keep building a relationship. And it is so vitally important, as you're speaking to, Tandreia, because later in life, as you're looking to make connections with others and drive other initiatives, just all the things we're involved in, that's when that network really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, I think another thing is it's a lot of people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would argue that it's a little bit of both, but more importantly, it's who knows you. Who knows Tandreia Bellamy and what she can do. And every time you interact with somebody, they get to see a little bit of who you are.
Yes.
Tandreia, I could see how afraid she was when we met.
No, he's completely kidding. But to our listeners,
but that's an important thing to recognize is a lot of people, it's not who you know. It really isn't, because I know Sig Mosley, right? One of the most influential investors and leaders in technology in Atlanta. He doesn't know me, so it doesn't do me any good, right? So it's important to get known.
Yes.
Right.
And so let's speak for just a quick second to our listeners that may be current undergrads, regardless of what program, or maybe they're young professionals. I think what Tandreia just shared there is so important. Work the 40, 50, 80 hours a week, whatever it takes, but take the time to establish and build relationships with folks across the network, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And to those young interns or new into the workforce, remember, somebody is always looking. So for all of my young people out there, stay off your cell phone. You don't need to snap or tweet or Insta while you're at your desk.
Right.
Do that on your free time.
Yeah.
If you're bored, if you have run out of work, go and ask for more. Do something to contribute to the workplace, not to just keep yourself occupied.
All right. So going back to your story, and you mentioned earlier that you already started at UPS while you were still an undergrad at Stanford. Let's talk about your most critical lesson learned from that first real-time employment, that first real-time job. What were an early critical lesson or two that you learned from that?
Results matter. So do your best in whatever job you're in. It doesn't make sense to aspire to be a VP if you're not doing your entry-level job to your fullest capability.
Wow.
Networking is important.
Let's loop that.
Networking is important internally as well as externally. Get to know who the decision makers are, who are the influential people within your area that you're working in. Get to know the knowledgeable people. There are people who are super smart, who know a lot, who just didn't aspire to get promoted. They can tell you a lot about the culture. They can tell you a lot about previous mistakes made. They can tell you all sorts of things. So don't discount anybody and don't overvalue anybody.
Well put.
Yeah. So to kind of follow on to that question, so can you tell us about maybe part of your when you reached the next rung on the ladder, when you got a promotion, how that came about, how you kind of positioned yourself for that?
UPS has a rich culture of promoting from within. UPS also has a very rich culture of results matter. So I was really positioned by not saying no when I was asked for, hey, can you do this? Can you pick this up? We're going through an economic downturn and we're going to slow down on promotions. However, we think that this would really be a good opportunity for you to manage an additional group of people. So I didn't say, no, I'm not doing the extra work without getting paid for it. It was like, okay, let's go. Everything that you can learn just really helps. So at the time of my promotion from supervisor to manager, I was really already doing the job of a manager. We were just in a slow spot, so there weren't any promotions that were happening. Fully understood that business reality, but I was still delivering results. And we would have an annual meeting within our geographic district that was called Report Back. And they would report back the overall results of the whole country to your business unit. And my district manager at the time, we had just about finished up the meeting, and he said, I'm going to call a couple of people up on stage. I want to give some recognition. Now, this was 1996, and I was thinking, I'm going to the Olympics. And he brought the four of us up on stage, and we all got promoted to manager.
Wow.
So, yes. It
Better
was
than the Olympics.
A much more long-lasting recognition than going to the Olympics. But honestly, when I stepped up on stage, that's what I thought. I was going to get to go to the Olympics.
Seems like they could have done both. Really?
I'll take the promotion.
Yeah, that's true.
And there might be a small portion of our listenership that may not realize that in 1996, Atlanta hosted the Olympics right here. All right, so let's kind of shift from discussing your personal journey, and I'm really excited about this next segment where we're going to talk more about the industry and get some of your insights, both from a practitioner standpoint and from a leadership standpoint, if that makes sense. So, you speak to groups across the country on a regular basis, maybe even internationally. I'm not sure. We hadn't talked about that component because UPS clearly is an international player. I've really enjoyed through some of our work together, serving on our advisory board with APICS Atlanta, speaking at groups like the Georgia Manufacturing Summit, being on here a couple times here on the podcast. I learned 17 new things each and every time. Let's talk about the last time when you were presenting kind of an overview of some of the technologies that were proliferating out, current state across supply chain. You kind of gave an overview of that at the Georgia Manufacturing Summit. What couple of those items, rather than go through all of them, what a couple of those technologies really stick out in your mind as most impactful right now?
I think not necessarily a specific technology, but really the approach to technology that's coming about. yes, you have the huge automatic storage and retrieval systems that are a very big investment and for a very specific purpose.
Right.
Most businesses can't afford them. So there are a lot of flexible technologies that are coming out now. There's a lot of places where you can start small, prove the concept, and then scale up. Swisslog's Carry Pick is very similar to Kiva that was bought out by Amazon, where it allows you to fit the system to where you are, and then as you grow, you just add more robots to the system. You don't have to demise and rebuild. You just add in additional
flex.
Flex. A lot of the autonomous technologies that are coming out with respect to forklifts and what it can do for you. You want to, any of those true non-value added activities, that transport activity, if you can stop people from doing that and have machinery do that until, the robotics are better at the picking. If you let the people do the picking part of the job and allow the technologies to do the transport, you get the best of both worlds.
I like that coboting approach, right?
Absolutely. So, again, there's a lot of different ways out there, a lot of different systems. But I would say, number one, you have to identify what your real problem is and then find the technology to solve the problem. There's a lot of bells and whistles that are being dropped on the market. And
hammers looking for nails, right?
Absolutely, positively, which is the best way to not get additional funding. If you go out and convince your organization to spend money and then you don't get the return because you bought a technology that doesn't really solve your problem, you've really done a double disservice. You've wasted money, and it's very unlikely that you're going to get another investment.
Outstanding. And you were laughing at as she was sharing, because we talk a lot about companies regardless of size, where leaders see a technology, it's the latest and greatest thing. It may not fit, but they want it. They want to bring it in and then find a place. That hammer meets nail.
Yeah.
You see a lot of that.
Yeah,
right?
a lot of AI, and a lot of, pick a keyword these days, right? A lot of people are going, I want AI, and they don't know what they want it for. I want this or that. Robotics is another one, right? Is another one. You know what you made me think of in talking about that is kind of we use this term, I'm going to try this word, democratization of a lot of those technologies. So you mentioned Swisslog. There's a company here in Atlanta called Gray Orange that has a very similar device to the Kiva robots. And then you combine that with some of these, what I call edge distribution companies, where they can take a piece of a 3PL facility and offer that to, to an e-commerce provider or something like that. There's a lot of what I call anyone but Amazon sentiment out there for fulfillment, for distribution, for those things. And that, when we create competition, whether it is UPS or it's UPS in combination with some of these democratized type solutions, or it's those democratized solutions themselves, then I think that accrues to the benefit of the entire supply chain.
Absolutely.
Yep. Right.
And the consumers, for sure. Okay, so moving from that kind of that practice, and thank you for sharing that practitioner perspective on all the approach to technologies, the technologies themselves, and how all that's evolving. Let's talk about leadership. That's one of our favorite topics that dominates whenever we get together. That typically dominates the conversation. Last time we were together, we talked about lip service leadership and how we aren't big fans of lip service leadership. So I want to ask you about who is one of or the best leader you've ever worked with or for, or that's ever worked for you, and what made them so successful when it comes from leadership?
Leaders who can rally a team. And I'm not going to mention names because, hopefully a whole lot of UPSers listen to this, and I don't want to, I've come across a lot of great leaders, but leaders who rally a team are definitely by far the best. The ones who are what I would term bottom up versus top down leaders. Leaders who are in the trenches with their teams to find out what do the teams really need, how do I best support my team, and then actually support them. Don't go out and tell your folks, oh, you need to just run a little bit harder, or you need to just do this. And then when they come and say, this is what I need, you back away from the table. Leaders that are engaged are by far the best leaders. Leaders that spend time with their teams. One of the things that I think is being lost a lot in this world of do more with less, this world of technology driving, expanding areas of control, is there's not side-by-side coaching being done. Virtual teams have a place. However, if everything is done virtually, you never get to know your people. If you're not there to really see where the shortfalls are, you can't help address the shortfalls with specifics. I'm right now just collecting kids. That's what I say. I've got a lot of young people who just want to talk, and that's great. I've got a lot of young people who will come to me and say, and these are people who have nothing to do with industrial engineering. I'm being asked to do X, but I really don't understand why. I don't know what it's going to be used for. I don't know what the information even really means. I'm just being asked to run the reports or do the analytics. And they say, so how do I ask to be in the room? And I said, you've got to be able to tell them how it benefits the business for you to be in the room. Hey, I would really like to go to the next strategy meeting so that I can fully understand how my reports are being used, and then I'll be better able to identify errors or to help improve the report or to even give you a different look at the analysis if I know how it's being used. If the managers would spend time with those young people that are just entering the workforce, that are at the front line, they would know what the desire is. You have, unfortunately, folks that say, well, no, just go sit down and do the report that I told you to do. And you're discouraging that kid. You're not helping that kid grow. And you're probably not going to keep that kid because you've reduced the importance of what they're doing. If you say it's just a report, they're going to view it as just a report. If it's strategic information that's going to help us make better decisions, everybody feels better about the process.
Wow.
Management by walking around, right? Tom Peters introduced this concept decades ago, long before any of us were really
That's true.
in business. But, I think you're right. We've kind of lost, not always, but in many cases, the pendulum swings one direction, right? Open offices, right? Now the pendulum is swinging back the other direction because people realize how unproductive open offices are. And it's swinging towards remote work, right? Somewhere in the middle or some sort of hybrid is probably the best part, because I can't tell you how many big problems get solved over the water cooler or whatever the equivalent device is, right?
Right.
Or you go by and you see something on somebody's desk and it triggers a discussion that solves a problem right there. That is so valuable, but a manager has to be out there.
You have to be out there. It makes you so much more accessible.
Yep.
If I'm walking and I stop at a desk and I ask, so what are you working on? And that person has a question about it, they're much more likely to ask me right there than to actually come to my office or pick up the phone, because the first thing is, I know you're really busy. Well, I'm going to
do it in a meeting because they risk looking dumb.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. So
yeah, that's great.
So again, speaking to some of our folks that are just beginning their careers, what is the number one piece of leadership advice that you give them right now?
If they're just beginning their careers, it's understand who to align yourselves with. It is listen. Find out who speaks with fact and who speaks with forked tongue, because there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, are disgruntled or just want to always point out shortcomings. Who is really forward-thinking? Who is giving you information that gives you some substance, gives you something that you can do with it? Listen a lot, repeat very little, especially if you're new, because you really don't know. ask your managers, because you do have a lot of young managers as well. When you sit down and you have a review, ask for specifics. It's going to put them in a position where they have to, moving forward, have specifics.
Right. Quantify.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, the growing is in the detail. If you really want to know how you're doing, you want to know what you can do more, how you can progress, ask.
Yeah.
Ask.
Yeah. Outstanding, as always. So as we're going to move into the last portion of this segment where we really want to pick your brain on some important issues of the day. Greg, I'll let you take the lead on this here.
Yeah, so I said earlier, I've got 3 daughters. Mm-hmm. One of them both of them, the 2 older ones have already gone the college track, and both are out of school now and in their careers. The younger one really kind of surprised me, so I'm going to share the story quickly.
Yeah. She
dropped something eye makeup thing down her stool, and I was not at home. So she found a YouTube video and she took the stool up off the floor, got the thing out,
Beautiful.
Cleaned it all up, and reinstalled it. It's one of the few toilets in our house. It doesn't leak at all. So that always has me thinking about non-traditional roles, not just college roles, but technical roles, right? And that's an issue in and of itself. So many people have college degrees.
How many times have we talked about the lack of vocational education?
Right. Doesn't even differentiate you anymore. But at the same time, if you think about STEM and things like that, I think of that kind of in the same vein, because those are, as I said earlier, like engineering, it's a very specific and applicable and internal skill, right? So can you tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities and challenges and things that you've seen with STEM for women in the workplace or women in education?
Wow.
Sorry.
Okay.
I laid the heavy one down.
No, it's just there's so much because start at the beginning. And this is something that has been a concern of mine for a long time. You have a fear of math and sciences that's projected onto girls at a very early age. And a lot of it comes very innocently from teachers, elementary school teachers. I remember my daughter's 4th grade social studies teacher telling everybody how much she hated math. Well, now for all of the little girls in that class who adored her, it's okay to hate math. You have that happens very early on. We have just so many role-based stereotypes in the world, and we see it in this country a lot. And strong girls are categorized or ostracized or any other eyes that you want to do.
Lots of eyes.
Minimized.
Yeah. Any other eyes that you want to do. If we had more programs that really truly let girls and validated girls and celebrated girls that wanted to do non-traditional things, it would become traditional. It's only non-traditional because we categorized it that way.
Yeah.
I think about the big fight that's going on right now for pay equality. We want equal pay. Well, I really don't want equal pay in low-paying jobs. I want you to go after the jobs that pay the most, which are generally in the STEM area, STEM, and then get equal pay. But why fight for equal pay for a job that's still not going to put you where you need to be economically? So the other thing
So can I ask you a quick question?
Just a second.
Yeah.
One of the, I think it was the first radio show that I was on with you. I had done some research because so many women who even get engineering degrees leave the field. And one of the studies said it was because of what happens at the entry level. Women are pushed to be the note takers or the project manager for the engineering team instead of the one the ones who are actually doing the research or using the cool machines or whatever. Women
creating
are
the value.
They're pushed into, even with engineering degrees, marginalized roles. Engineering interns coming in while they're still in college. The females, unless they're just really strong-willed, a lot of times get the less glamorous of the assignments once they're actually in a company. Our CIO talks about some of the struggles that his daughter had at her company, again, being marginalized. And that is really, really a shame that you can prove that you have the aptitude and the intelligence and the tenacity and the wherewithal and actually get your engineering degree and walk into a workplace and that not be respected to the level that it should be. So let her fix all of your toilets and encourage her to do it.
Glad to.
Yes.
No doubt. And she's good at math too. So
Excellent.
and I think that's a good thing. But one thing
there's look up ID Tech. ID Tech.
Okay.
They have a ton of camps during the summer at colleges all over, but Georgia Tech has them. There's one program where you actually build your own laptop that you then walk away with. So it lets you have a lot of hands-on. They have 3D printing ones. They have, like I said, the one that does the construction of the laptop. But there's several different camps that go on. They have some that are all girls. They have others that are co-ed. And just let her explore.
Well, there's no stopping her.
Good.
I mean, there's one thing that you talked about. You talked about being powerful, right?
Yeah.
And there's one thing that my wife assures that happens. Their grandmother assures that happens.
Empowered.
They're not. My girls aren't built to complain. They're just built not to accept anything but what they're due.
Good.
So, and I think that's as important as anything. But one of the things that you talked about that I think we need to make the world conscious of is those seemingly meaningless and careless comments, right? I can look. I'm not trying to make this about me, but this is a really simple example. I was in class, 3rd grade or something like that, and we were doing a drawing thing, and I erased, and the teacher came up to me and said, "Real artists don't erase." I never drew again. Wow. So it seems like an innocuous comment to say, "I hate math."
Yes.
Right. I hate algebra or whatever, but kids are sponges at a certain age. You have to be really, really careful and really intentional with what you say to them.
Yes.
So I think that's a really valid point. And of course you have to, and what I've seen, what I've experienced from my mother, what I've experienced from other women. One of my favorite women in the world was a judge. She was a badass, by the way. What I've seen work is exactly that. You don't have to complain. You don't have to necessarily ask as much, but you have to know. You have to know inequality when you're seeing it, and you just have to refuse to accept that. Right? I think we had a conversation with Daniel Stanton and Sherry Heinisch some time back, and Sherry said, I had to have this awkward conversation with an offender. And my response to that is, why is that the awkward conversation? Why is the response to the offender the awkward conversation, not the offending comment? That should be the awkward thing. That person, whoever that offender was, should have felt awkward, not felt empowered. And I think we need more of that in the workplace.
Well, along those lines, what else, speaking to the business leaders, the practitioners, all of our listeners, how do we, as you kind of painted that picture, clearly there's some deep-rooted environmental, something we're not going to change sitting here today. It's like a build-up, right? It's a transformation, right? But how do you, if you had to put a top 2 list or top 3 list of things that folks can take action to do that would help move the needle in some way, shape, or form, what does that small list look like?
Be involved and engaged is the biggest one. And again, we have so many biases, stereotypes, what have you. The big one now is the millennials, and the millennials are this, and the millennials are that. How much time do you actually spend with them? And how much of the perceived issues did you create? So now, seriously, and we have such a multi-generational workplace now. Being able to get the leaders to respect what everybody brings to the table in their own right. Yes, young people are different. They're different than us. They're different than us for a whole lot of reasons, but they're extremely capable if they are led. If you leave them to their own devices, they do what they've been doing. And because so much of what takes place is electronic right now, they're not the best communicators. They can write really well, but to sit them down and force the issue with a conversation, not so much. Especially if it's anything that is deemed remotely confrontational. So you have to spend time coaching them. If you want your future leaders to be strong within your organization, you've got to spend time with them, both doing work-related things, but also just talking to them,
building a relationship. That's almost like where you're proactively solving problems, because with a stronger rapport and stronger relationships, whatever comes up around the corner, you're better suited as a team to hit the ball out of the ballpark, right?
Yes.
I want to take the next 3 hours and continue driving on this, but for the sake of time,
let's do it over lunch.
Yes, we'll definitely. Yeah. So to our audience, I wish y'all could join us.
Folks,
for some of the best empanadas in Atlanta. But
there he goes again.
Oh,
that's right.
We need to be getting money out of these.
Yes,
people.
without a doubt.
I love to eat. All right, so let's move ahead, because I want to, as we begin to wrap up the interview, a couple final questions here. So from a supply chain standpoint, what is your one or two biggest takeaways from 2019?
Industrial engineers are going to be extremely important moving forward, because everything that I see, read, feel, we're going to have an economic slowdown, which means efficiency is once again going to rise to the top of the list. How are we going to continue to make the profit, squeeze the margin, reduce headcount, the myriad other things, reduce inventory, increase inventory turns? All of the things that are going to make industrial engineers extremely important are really going to come to the forefront over the next couple of years. So go and find you good industrial engineers and then work with them, work side by side with them. Make sure that they understand the strategic business objectives, not just giving them orders on activities to complete.
Real quick, sidebar conversation, because I've seen something on social media that caught my eye and I hadn't had a chance to dive in deeper. But the gist of this, and I can't remember the companies that were involved, but it basically was a movement to encourage hiring managers and business leaders to get past the resume and not let that guide who they spend time with to understand and hire and bring on the team and onboard and all that stuff. Quick thought on that, because as organizations are looking to acquire more engineering talent, industrial engineering talent, based on where we're going, the economy, all that, how would you? Is that smart? Is that not so smart? How do you approach that?
The best way to do that is to have co-ops and interns. Bring them in young. Get to know them before they graduate. Then you're not counting on the resume. Best resume in the world really doesn't tell you what somebody's work ethic is. If you are just going to be, surfing resumes, you've got to look for kids who have taken the opportunity to be in organizations and be leaders in the organizations. Not just say I was a member so that they can add it to the list, but actually that drove something. But I think co-ops and internships are absolutely, positively the best way to develop your talent pool.
Outstanding.
Clear evidence of exceptional talent. So somebody asked Elon Musk that recently. And, the possibility that somebody gets overlooked in a stack of resumes is to somehow discern where somebody has gone above and beyond, as you said, or has overcome a difficulty or met a high level challenge, whatever. I think that is how you get past that, right? Okay, so my job now, as you've probably figured out, is to drop the bombs on you. So how about a bold prediction for 2020 or beyond? What do you see out there that inspires or concerns or,
definitely
motivates you?
Economic downturn is a huge concern. We already have put ourselves in a situation where it's the service jobs that are growing in this country. We put ourselves in a position where the minimum wage is rising for jobs that really don't have the value to keep up with the wage rate that are rising. And if we can't figure out the importance of things like vocational education, how much, if your daughter wasn't fixing your toilets, how much would you be paying for a plumber?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of jobs that were very valued in the past that somehow we now look down our noses at them, but we all need them. So my bold prediction, I guess, is cautionary. And if we get into another economic tailspin, how are we going to work our way out of it as a country, especially as divisive as the election cycle can be next year?
All right, so we have kind of covered a range of topics here today, like I knew we would. There's so many things we want to pick your brain on, and we'll continue the conversation over lunch. But how can folks that that want to hear more and compare notes with you, learn more about what your team at UPS is doing, how do you recommend folks reach out?
The easiest way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I am pretty active on LinkedIn. Don't take part in a lot of the other social network platforms, but I am very active on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out and connect.
Fantastic. Well, we've been talking with Tandreia Bellamy with UPS Global Freight Forwarding. Thanks so much for your time today. Yeah. It was, I had a high bar, surpassed the bar as always, and I look forward to learning more down the road a little bit. So, but sit tight for a second. We're going to cover a couple events. We're going to share a couple events with our audience where we're going to be at and invite them to join us before we wrap up today's episode. But if you heard anything here today or on past shows that you can't find via Google, or you can't find a site we talk about or a resource, shoot a note to our CMO at amanda@supplychainnowradio.com. We'll do our best to serve as a resource for you. Greg, we've got we'll be here throughout the end of the year, right?
Thankfully,
home base,
yes.
Right. We just got back from Austin, Texas, as we've been talking about. That's a lot longer drive than what most people think. But it's good to be back. We're still publishing all the content from that Logistics CIO forum. But where are we going to be at next, Greg?
So we've got the CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable, January 15th.
That's right.
2020.
Open to the public.
Yeah.
AtlantaCSCMP.org to learn more. They're featuring a leader from NASTRAC that's going to be talking about some of the regulation changes in industry, especially those that impact the transportation sector and what it means for your business. So should be a great lunch event. We're going to be interviewing board members and maybe the guest speaker there, but January 15th, 2019. And then what?
Then February 4, we go to Vegas, baby.
Oh.
And you want to go with us? And for the Reverse Logistics Association Conference, Tony Sciarrotta, he coined that phrase.
That's right.
And his team talking about one of the biggest topics in retail, yes. E-retail or bricks and mortar retail, returns in reverse logistics and circular economy.
Yep.
Right. So that's going to be an interesting one.
It's going to be a home run event. We're kind of into the last couple of months of planning with he and the team there. And RLA, that's a global group. They happen to be based here in Atlanta. But as we talk about it, every time this comes up, you've got some companies that really have gotten their act together and they know how to do reverse logistics and returns. And you got other well-known, well-run companies that are still looking for best practices because of what e-commerce is doing. But that is, the RLA is a clearinghouse for a lot of the intel, the best practices, the networking within that space, and you can learn more at rla.org. Tony Sirota is that executive director of the group and does an outstanding. He's a walking best practice. I mean, the guy spent 20
he did
plus
it
years,
himself before he took this over. Yeah,
that's right.
So,
and then we're someplace where I know plenty of UPSers will be, Modex 2020.
Yeah, March 9th to 12th, 2020. That is a huge show. 35,000 of our closest friends attending that, right? It's free to attend unless you want to put up a factory or a warehouse like so many companies do. And it's like Tinker Toys for grown-ups there. It's amazing to see some of the facilities that get built as a display.
Absolutely.
At that show.
And then all of the seminars and workshops and
so much education there.
Absolutely.
And don't forget since we're all on
just a second, the CIO at UPS was a keynote. Just a year, the last time Modex rolled through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Juan Perez was a keynote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I sat on that session. I think the governor introduced him.
Yeah.
Well received. And that was on the front end of the big, I'm not going to get this right, but the digitization project, transformation project that UPS rolled out to serve its customers even better. So a great keynote. And that's kind of what, Modex, the keynote, like to your point, the keynotes, the networking, the market intel, the breakouts.
Yes.
And the incredible thing is it's free to attend.
Yes.
Modexshow.com, MODEX show.com. And now, Greg, going back to what you're about to say last time.
Well, and on the 10th, the second day of Modex, so we have the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.
Excellent event.
Yes. And thank you. And I know that you're not biased because it's not like you're on the executive committee or anything.
Well, they sold out the first year.
Yes.
Very well done.
Yeah. So we had to increase the scale of the event to
phenomenal.
I think we're limiting to 300 seats this time, right?
That's right.
But nominations are open. Sponsorships are available.
Registration's even open.
Yeah, that's right. Registration, get that table close to the front.
Yes,
right.
It will sell out again. And and we should acknowledge it. When we had the APICS Atlanta and CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable and the Metro Atlanta Chamber come together to make the first year events happen. It kind of was a play off a variety of older ideas and different. There's been awards that did logistics only, and there's been awards that did different segments. Air cargo, great.
Just tech.
Yeah, just tech too. But we wanted to kind of recognize the whole end-to-end supply chain and bring that community together. And we couldn't have done it without UPS and Georgia Pacific and these other outstanding organizations that got behind it to make it the event in the first year that it was. So thank you to you for making that happen, Tandreia Bellamy. And we look forward to going bigger in year 2.
Yeah, and by the way, speaking of Georgia Pacific, Christian Fisher, the president and CEO of Georgia Pacific, is going to be our keynote speaker. And Shan Cooper, right, is going to be our MC. I'm looking forward to that. She's a really cool speaker, and she'll keep the energy going.
Absolutely. And with huge supply chain chops.
Yeah.
She led the Lockheed facility, which you touched on earlier. She served as Chief Transformation Officer at West Rock. Not often do you get an MC that knows more about supply chain than many folks in attendance, but we've got between Christian and Shan, we've got a great 1-2 punch. Atlanta SupplyChainAwards.com. Register early and often. That will sell out. Nominate. We're banging the drum hard on nominations.
Yeah.
So our advice there is if you don't see a perfect category, just nominate. If we need more information, we'll always circle back. We've got, I think, 14 different categories. We added a few a few categories, including Supply Chain Startup of the Year, a Reverse Logistics Award with our friends Tony Sirota and RLA.
Yep.
There's something for everybody. AtlantaSupplyChainAwards.com. One final note, and big, by the way, big thanks to Modex for hosting that award and the whole event there with Modex being the backdrop at the Georgia World Congress Center. We just added one more event to our slate. I might be surprised at Greg.
No, sorry, the AME Atlanta, May 4th to 7th, right? Their Lean Summit.
Yep. And so our listeners may be familiar with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, right? We love our acronyms in supply chain.
Yes.
International group, well, probably the biggest focus is the U.S., but based up in Chicago, they've got a Southeast regional team that hosts these lean summits every year. They're bringing their national conference to Atlanta in 2021, but they're expecting 300 or so plant managers, VP of Ops, folks that love manufacturing are going to be here May 4th through the 7th. And as the title suggests, it's going to be big focus on lean. So those efficiencies you spoke to earlier, I'm sure, especially by the time May rolls around, that it's going to be a priority once again, or even a bigger priority than what it is now. So that you can learn more at ame.org, and that is also open to the public. Plant tours, keynotes, you name it, will be broadcasting from the first day, I believe. Okay, what a show. Really, we every week we want to bring you back on. I'm sure your busy schedule could
still have a day job.
No, but I think, I think from this this conversation, just kind of playing back what we've spoken about over the last hour and some change, regardless if you're looking for professional development ideas, or if you're looking for leadership ideas, or you're kind of trying to better understand how we're approaching technology and supply chain, there's going to be something for everybody in this episode. So thanks so much, Tandreia Bellamy, for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And Greg, great show, huh?
Yeah, great. I know you've gone through hardships in your career, but you are very straightforward. Deal with it, move on, make stuff happen. Practical. I love that perspective. Yep. That's powerful stuff.
Okay, so to our audience, be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube,
yes,
one of Greg's favorite,
wherever else. I'm not answering that anymore. I'm leaving that to you.
Wherever else you find your podcast, we'll be there. I think we're up to 20 channels now, roughly. On behalf of the entire team, Scott Luton here, wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.